Hi, this is Bill Ringle, host of My Quest for the Best, where we meet business, thought, and community leaders to discuss issues relevant to entrepreneurial growth.
Joining us today is Doug Conant. Doug is founder and CEO of Conant Leadership, which is dedicated to helping improve the quality of leadership in the 21st century. He was appointed president and CEO of Cambell Soup Company in 2001 after 25 years' experience with three of the world's top food companies, General Mills, Kraft, and Nabisco. While at Cambell, he helped reverse the company's serious decline in market value and employee engagement and established the Cambell CEO Institute to train the company's future leaders. When Doug retired in 2011, he received the American Society of Training and Development's 2011 Champion of Workplace Learning and Performance Award. He's now a speaker on leading with integrity and other business topics, and is co-author of the New York Times best-selling book, Touchpoints, Creating Powerful Leadership Connections in the Smallest of Moments. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Doug, where did you start your career?
I started my career back in the dark ages, 1976 to be exact. It was March of 1976. I started my career after graduate school at Kellogg at Northwestern University, getting my MBA. I started my career in Minnesota, working for General Mills. The first month I moved there in March, the first 18 days in a row, the high temperature was below zero. And I thought it was cold in Chicago. So anyway, it was a long and great career in the consumer packaged goods industry, and General Mills was a terrific place to start my career, with a focus primarily on marketing and brand management, but ultimately it broadened to general management.
As you think back to that career, what was an early lesson you learned that helped you make the transition from being an MBA student to being a manager and a business leader?
I learned, I think, very early on that most of the people I worked with had full lives, and if they were going to be helpful to me, I genuinely needed to be helpful to them. So I adopted very early on this approach of trying to find ways to be helpful, and I found the more I leaned into that notion, the more people leaned into their efforts to be helpful to me and to move the enterprise forward. It started with small projects and everyday to-do list kinds of things, but ultimately, 25 years later, it found its way into the fabric of how I ran Cambell Soup Company. I think there was a key event at General Mills was when I was fired. I had been with the company for 9 years. I was in a subsidiary at the time, Parker Brothers Toys and Games. We were spun off from General Mills, and the new owners eliminated a few levels, and I can remember going into work one day. I'd been working with the company for over 9 years, and being told to go see the acting vice president of marketing. I was director of marketing at the time, and the receptionist said, "You need to go see Larry." I went to see Larry, and Larry said to me, "Doug, your job has been eliminated. You need to be out of here by noon." And my entire career was over in a snap. And that was one of the most devastating experiences of my life. I just kept my head down and was trying to do my job as well as I could and just trying to be helpful. And I was totally caught off guard. That same day, they sent me to a executive outplacement counselor, and on the heels of probably the most devastating experience I'd had in the workplace at the time, and they sent me to this fellow, and his name was Neil McKenna. And I called him at the end of the day. I just didn't know what to do. And he said, "Hello, my name is Neil McKenna. How can I help?" And he said, "I need you to come over right away. We need to talk this through." And so and it was late afternoon, early evening, and he was there for me completely. All he wanted to do was be helpful to me. And over the course of the next 15 years until he passed away, or nearly 20 years, he became one of my best friends and mentors. And in that same day where I had this devastating event, I had this man at the end of the day saying, "Hello, my name is Neil McKenna. How can I help?" And it reaffirmed for me the importance of just trying to be helpful in a thoughtful, caring way, with intentionality and purpose to move the enterprise forward. But ultimately, it's just trying to be helpful.
So that was a very dramatic day for you. What were some of the things that you thought about that I'm sure the immediate relief from the company caused you to question? And then how did you recover and rebound from that experience?
That's a challenging thing, and at the time it was not as typical as it is today for people to be changing jobs. So you felt as if you had to explain yourself very carefully. And my first thought was one of betrayal and devastation. I'd given everything I had to this company for 9 years, and I felt it was incredibly insensitive the way it was handled. And that was a good thing, too, because ultimately I've had to make tough calls like this, too, but I've made them in a caring way. And had I not been on the other side of this experience, I don't think I would have been as thoughtful or as considerate when I was making the tough calls as ultimately I became. But beyond devastation, I then went home to my wife, my 2 small kids, and my giant mortgage, feeling very much the victim. And so those were my initial feelings. It was personal devastation. When I went to meet with Neil that day, he challenged me in his language to turn the coin over and take this, and acknowledging that this wasn't going to happen overnight, to take this situation and turn the coin over and take it as a challenge to now conduct the best job search on the planet. And to think about how I could distinguish myself in a way that I would feel good about in pursuit of my next job. And so within a few weeks, I sort of came around to turning the coin over and got beyond mourning what I'd lost and got very focused on what I needed to do to get back on the horse and move forward. But an incredibly challenging time, but really instructive for me. And probably, in hindsight, one of the best things I ever went through was the tragedy of losing the job, the euphoria ultimately of taking a job that really suited me well, and the process in between of picking myself up and dusting myself off and getting back in the game again. You know, there's in the summers I read Louis L'Amour novels. It's Great Escape. I think he's certainly written over 100 of them, and I've probably read all of them 3 times because I can't remember the storylines. But he has this great quote in one of them. He said, you know, he never knew when he was licked, so he never was. And I sort of carried that with me as I went through this experience. I sort of picked myself up and decided, you know, this is a challenge, but it's only temporal, and I just have to pick myself and get back up in the game. And it was a good thing to go through. At the time, it was pretty frightening.
Absolutely. I'm sure many people who are listening to this interview can identify with that. Now, everyone who has an MBA may aspire to doing great things and always wish that this never happened to them, that they're always recognized as one of the best and brightest. And here you are able to share with us and say this is something that does happen, it's a part of life, and it actually made you stronger. What would you say are a couple of the skills that you developed in your career that prepared you to take on the challenge of turning around Cambell's when you were offered the job in 2001?
Meta Norgard and I wrote the book Touch Points, Creating Powerful Leadership Connections in the Smallest of Moments. And I have to say that the philosophy captured in that book is at the heart of what I'm going to share with you now. You talked about great things a moment ago. Great things are having powerful incremental impacts in the moment with people. You know, a great thing for me was having just a few minutes ago a powerful conversation with my daughter over the phone that lasted maybe 30 seconds, as she has learned that a coworker of hers in a small office, a very good friend, has Hodgkin's disease. And we were talking this over. And, you know, I was able to sit and listen and hopefully say the right thing in the right way at the right time to help her process all this. And that's a great thing. And to me, life is just a sequence of interactions. And if I'm really alert and thinking abundantly, I find that I can be helpful in those small interactions. And cumulatively over time, I develop enormous credibility, what Stephen Covey might call a very positive emotional bank account with people. And as we build the emotional bank account up, it's amazing what we find we are able to do collectively and individually. So I like to focus on the moments and make the most of those moments and be helpful to the people that I interact with in life. So I think in that spirit, it's also about making it personal. You know, people are either at work or thinking about work more than anything else they do, including spending time with their families. And I think we sort of have to honor that as sacred ground, their work. And I think we have to take it personally and try and be personally helpful to the people who, with our coworkers. And I have found that if I make it personal and I lean into creating a personally fulfilling work experience for people, they lean into the agenda of our company in a more personal and committed way. So the notion of make it personal, be alert to the moment, be helpful in the moment, are two of the foundational ideas that I have. And that having been said, I guess the third one would be that leadership ultimately, it starts with personal leadership and gaining influence, getting comfortable with the things you can control and controlling them in a thoughtful and intentional way. But ultimately, influencing others is both a science and an art. And if you really want to be good at leadership, my observation is that you have to treat it as a mastery model. You have to apprentice at it. You have to work at it. You have to study it. You have to be thoughtful about it. You have to think through your philosophy on how you want to walk in the world and how you want to lead. And I have found the more time I spend reflecting on the kind of leader I want to be and being a student of the craft of leadership, the better I get. That's not surprising, I guess. You know, the harder I work at it, the better I get. I take issue, for the most part, with this concept of born leaders. Some leaders have a capacity to lead at a certain level that may be above average, but to be great, I guarantee you they all work at it. Jack Welch at GE, the corporate leader of the 20th century, would tell you that, you know, he felt he had an aptitude for leadership. He would also tell you he worked his ass off trying to become a better leader and ultimately created Crotonville for GE and created this very rich leadership education program for GE that's second to none in the world. And because he believed if you want to really be good at this, you have to work at it, and you never stop. So make it personal, pay attention to the moments, and build a leadership philosophy that's anchored in good, thoughtful study and treat leadership as a craft. Those are some of the lessons I learned early on that I've carried forward through my time at Cambell Soup Company and into my current work.
Let's rewind back to the point of when you were being offered in discussion for the position of being CEO of Cambell. How serious was the situation?
The Cambell Soup Company was in dire straits. It was at the turn of the millennium. It was 2000. I started January 8, 2001. But there were a few things going on. One, Cambell internally had a disastrous performance. We'd lost half our market value in 1 year, which is unheard of for a food company or a consumer packaged goods company that has so much equity in the marketplace. You don't usually lose that kind of market value. But we lost half our market value in a year, and it went back to a failed acquisition strategy, and the acquisitions weren't adequately integrated. And then we started to stumble on earnings, so we said, well, let's take the prices up to improve the earnings. So we took the prices up, and our earnings actually got better, but our volumes dropped. and said we can't take the price up anymore, so we have to take the cost down. So we started a major productivity drive where we began ultimately to compromise the integrity of our product by taking costs out. We were literally taking the chicken out of chicken noodle soup. And then when we we couldn't take the prices up, and then we compromised product quality by taking the costs down. Volumes fell further, and we said, well, we can't afford to advertise and promote these products. So we cut the marketing budget, which is part of the lifeblood of a consumer packaged goods company. And our earnings held up, because we took the spending away, but our volume fell further. And then we said, we can't afford all this overhead with the volumes falling down like they do. So we had several layoffs. In one layoff, we let go over 200 people in our R&D organization. And innovation and R&D is the lifeblood of a consumer packaged goods company. So we not only were struggling to deliver in the present, we also compromised our ability to deliver in the future. And the market started to see things falling apart and lost total confidence in our enterprise. We were trapped in what a friend of mine calls the circle of doom, where we were over-promising and under-delivering and then making bad decisions to patch up the performance. And one thing led to another, and the company was tragically compromised. At the same time, we had an industry that was consolidating. So Unilever was buying Best Foods, Kellogg was buying Keebler, Kraft was buying Nabisco. So there was this consolidation going on while the stronger were acquiring the weak ones. And it was feared that Cambell would end up being put in play because our performance was so bad. So we had this internal mess, and then we had this external environment that was not friendly to us.
Were these the conditions that were present prior to you coming on board, or as you came on board?
I said we, but I wasn't there. I was at Nabisco. So, and Nabisco at the time was on a great run, and we were acquired by Kraft. So I was recruited in from the outside to take this challenging situation and make it work. I had a track record of being able to do that as president of Nabisco Foods. We turned that company around after KKR acquired it in the Barbarians at the Gate episode. We were recruited in to rebuild Nabisco and did a nice job. So that's what opened the opportunity for me to go do the same thing at Campbell Soup Company.
And what would be one of the most important insights you had that led you to believe that there was hope to turn this organization around? Was it meeting a particular person? Was it particular assets that were not being utilized correctly? Was it a flaw in their strategy that you saw? What was it that led you to say to yourself, yeah, this could be done?
My experience is that there are certain criteria you got to have to win in the marketplace. First of all, you have to be in large categories that have their wind at their back. So in our case, we were in some advantaged categories in the food industry that had the potential that were large and growing and had the potential to continue to expand. So you've got to be in large categories with the wind at your back. Number two is you have to have the number one or number two brand in the category to have the critical mass, the presence in the category to affect performance. It's hard to be the number 3, 4, or 5 brand and have an enduring victory there. It's not unheard of. It's just difficult. The third thing is you have to it takes money to make money. So you have to have the margin structure and the cash flow necessary to invest in the business in order to continue to grow the brands and drive the category. The fourth thing you need is an organization that has the capacity to pull the levers to make all that happen. At Campbell, we were in large categories with the wind at our back. We had number one or number two brands by and large, and we had great cash flow and good margins. The challenge to us was to rebuild the capacity of the organization to pull those levers smartly. And so I viewed it as a strategic challenge to get refocused, but really an organization challenge to get the right people on the bus in the right seats, and to position us to drive superior performance over time. And that was right in my sweet spot, so that was my focus.
And in the early days or months of working at Cambell, what was the moment where you started to see some traction and momentum leading in a better direction?
This is not easy work. This is heavy lifting. I went into a very toxic environment where people were incredibly jaded and didn't trust leadership and thought, here comes this new guy, we'll see how long he lasts. And it literally took a few years to get the kind of traction we needed and get the company on solid footing. We set up a transformation plan my first year. I started in January. We announced the transformation plan in July. And we said it's going to take us 3 years to get our sea legs and to be fully competitive again. We've really compromised our ability to compete. We have a lot of heavy lifting to do. And we didn't restructure the company, but we did reset expectations. And the language we used is you can't talk your way out of something you behaved your way into. You have to behave your way out of it. And we had behaved our way into a difficult situation over about a 5-year period. We said it's going to take us 3 years to get this level set. And we created benchmarks to do that. But the first 3 years were just extraordinarily challenging. And I think at the end of year 3, when we actually hit our goals for the 3rd year in a row, and we were up to being fully competitive again, we got to a point where I felt, we were on the right path now. So I'd say it was probably near the end of year 3 when I started to feel like, there's still a lot of heavy lifting to do, but we are well positioned now to get it done. And we saw employee engagement picking up in a sizable way, and we saw performance picking up, and you had a sense that this flywheel was starting to work in terms of we were winning in the category, we were investing smartly, we were planning for growth, and as I said, the flywheel was starting to work. So it was somewhere around year 3. This is not for the faint of heart. I was going to bed thinking about all the things we needed to do, 365 days a year for the first 3 years, and waking up thinking about the same thing. So it was a long, arduous journey.
What did you do to build relationships that you could trust within the company in order to help you disseminate and communicate what needed to be done?
Well, I literally posted a blog on the Harvard Business Review this week, or maybe last week, that gets at the essence of this. I think my headline in that blog is employees are not mind readers. You need to tell them what's expected and how they're expected to deliver that performance. And so expectations, people need to know what's expected and how are they expected to behave. And so we collaboratively developed the what and the how with our leadership team and with our entire employee population of about 20,000 people. And what I found, that was essential to our success. The more clear we could be, the more people, the more accessible the whole thing came to every employee. On the what side, we had this balanced scorecard idea that translated down to every manager in the organization and ultimately to every employee, where we talked about our financial goals, our marketplace goals, and some key projects every year. And then on the how side, we talked about, here are our expectations of leaders at Cambell. Here's the Cambell way of leading. And so we had 6 expectations of our leaders. And the 6 expectations were, first and foremost, that you inspired trust. Second, you created direction. Third, you drove organizational alignment. Fourth, you built organization vitality. Fifth, you executed with excellence. And sixth, you produced extraordinary results, which ultimately inspired more trust, and we created a flywheel performance model for leadership. People were evaluated against that model, and we had conversations regularly around that model. So we had the what and the how clearly explained over the first 3 years to a point where everybody was pretty clear what was expected. And I dare say clarity is next to godliness here. If it's clear, it's so much easier for the organization to engage in the effort. If it's ambiguous, one has great difficulty getting the organization to be fully engaged in the work. And I would say that I believe the single most important thing in any of these organizations is employee engagement. This is all about the people. You know, as a CEO, for 999 of the 1,000 decisions that were made in my company, I was not in the room. I had to rely on other people to operate with integrity and within the spirit of the way we had chosen to run things at Cambell. And it was all about them. It was not about me. And I have found over time that if I just focus on the people take care of the business. Not to say I wasn't focused on the business, because I think you have to do both. But if you have to put one in front of the other, you put the people first.
And to look at the business side for just a moment, many metrics are important. But was there a small set of metrics that you looked at in these early days in order to see that things were responding correctly with a particular initiative?
I believe that you can't manage it if you can't measure it. And so I'm a big believer in metrics. And this was an evolutionary thing, but ultimately, as we went through those first 3 years, we built what we called the Cambell success model. And we have this balanced scorecard, which had lots of metrics around financials, marketplace performance, delivering projects on time and on budget in a quality fashion, and a variety of things. But ultimately, to manage the enterprise, we said there were just a limited set of metrics, and and that grew out of what we started calling the Cambell success model. And we basically had 4 things we focused on. One was employee engagement. I believed, and there was evidence to it, working with the Gallup organization, that if we could get the employees to have the eye of the tiger every day at work, and if they did it in a way where they had each other's backs, that we could perform at a higher level than we would otherwise. And in fact, that was the case. So we focused on employee engagement and something we called an engagement ratio, the number of people wildly engaged in the work for every person who was not wildly engaged in the work. And we had a way of surveying and measuring that every year, and we reported it in our annual report. So that was what we called winning in the workplace. It was about employee engagement. We then talked about winning in the marketplace, which was outperforming our peers in terms of total share owner returns. And we would report that every year in the in the annual report. And that was a rolling 3-year total share owner return measure, which we felt was appropriate for our industry. And then the third area was about winning in the community, and that was about leveraging the organization to not only win with our investors, but also to win in terms of creating social value. So we talked about, we didn't know how to measure that, but we had lots of people that did. So at Boston College, they have the Reputation Institute there, which is where they survey in a 360-degree way all the interested parties regarding the most socially responsible U.S. corporations. And we said we want to be in the top 10 on that measure. And so we started measuring winning in the community and being a socially responsible company. And the last one was winning with integrity, which sounds like a throwaway line, but our integrity had been questioned when we were struggling so much, and we needed to state that firmly and clearly. And we didn't know how to measure that either, but we had lots of activist groups that were measuring our integrity, and we picked one of the more challenging ones, and that was the Ethisphere Institute. And we said we want to be one of the 100 best, most ethical companies on their list. And so we set that as a goal. So those were the four areas: winning in the workplace, winning in the marketplace, winning in the community, winning with integrity. As we wrapped up my decade, the last 5 years, we were world class in terms of employee engagement. In fact, best of class. We were well ahead of our peers and the S&P 500 in terms of total shareowner returns. We were ranked consistently among the top 10 most socially responsible corporations in the U.S. by Boston College, and we were recognized by the Ethisphere Institute as one of the 100 most ethical companies in the world. So it helps to have metrics. It helps to create focus for the organization that says at a high level, this is what we want to stand for as a company, and then you hold yourself accountable to moving in the right direction.
It makes it very clear listening to you explain this. Like you said earlier, once you have clarity, it makes it easy for people to understand how they fit in, how their performance fits in, and really how to align with the company's goals. The other thing that I like about your metrics is that it takes it from individual, day-to-day, moment-to-moment actions, such as with integrity and employee engagement, all the way up to the big macro scale with economic measures and even externally with the community. I don't think many companies focus on the community quite the way you did, and I don't think that many CEOs would think to make that one of his or her top 4 issues. What led you to recognize the importance of involving the community in turning around Campbell Soup?
Well, if you buy the notion that employee engagement, the more engaged people can become in the work of the enterprise, the better you'll do. There are 4 conditions. There are 4 things that drive employee engagement. One is I have to make a living, and I want to work in an environment with good hygiene. That's sort of making a living. The second one is I want to feel loved. I want people to value my work. I want to feel valued as a person in my work. So, and this is from the individual's point of view, not the organization's point of view, because beauty in employee engagement is from the eyes of the beholder here, from the employee. They want to make a living. They want to feel loved. They also want to be learning and growing and developing new skills in a comfortable way. And finally, they want to be leaving a legacy of contribution that's second to none. If you really want to drive high levels of employee engagement, you've got to be dealing with all 4 levels: living, loving, learning, leaving a legacy. If you studied Maslow, that is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And what I found was driving an aggressive social agenda while we were driving an aggressive economic value creation agenda was very synergistic, because we were saying, here's how you can leave a legacy of contribution through your work that transcends your ordinary work experience while you're making a living, while you're feeling valued, and while you're learning. You can also be doing something special. And so I found it very synergistic. And the more we leaned into building a better world, the more engaged our employees got, and the better we performed in the marketplace. So I saw great synergy there. And then just one observation. At Cambell, we published 2 reports online for all of our employees. We published lots of things online, but 2 big ones. One was our annual report, and the other one was our corporate social responsibility report. Which one do you think was opened more and more often shared, the annual report or the corporate social responsibility report? I'll tell you, it was the CSR report by far. People were not opening up the annual report to show their spouses, their parents, their kids how Cambell did in terms of earnings per share. What they were sharing was, here's how Cambell is helping to make a better world. It was very personally meaningful to the vast majority of our employees. It was something they were proud to share with friends and family. And as they shared that, they got more affirmation from the community that they were doing worthy work, and they leaned into the work more. In many ways, this is not particularly complicated, and it's obvious. That having been said, I think the challenge in the next decade is going to be for corporations to build this intuitively obvious practice more into the fabric of how they run their companies. And I would say I'm very encouraged by what I see. I am chairman of the Committee Encouraging Corporate Philanthropy, which is an organization that was founded by Paul Newman when he created Newman's Own and saw the power of what a corporation could do to help build a better world. And he challenged companies to do that more significantly starting 13 years ago. And we're carrying that torch now for him and for a lot of others. And I see examples all over the landscape of companies leaning into this, trying to build a better world while they're also building better companies.
From your perspective, and you could speak to this now probably with a little bit more objectivity as you look out and you could focus outside of your company, can you see differences between companies that genuinely and authentically want to build a better world and create, like you did at Cambell, a hugely compelling value proposition for employees who wanted not just a place to work, but also a place to make a difference and to grow? Can you tell the difference through your observations and conversations with other leaders of those that are giving lip service to this versus those that are genuinely engaged in the practice, even though they may not have it perfect, but engaged and committed to the practice of doing it? And how can you tell in a 3 to 5 minute conversation? What would be some of the questions you would ask, and what would you listen for to tell if a leader was genuinely committed to this?
I have a bias. I think everybody wants to do better. And I think on balance, there are exceptions to every rule, but I think on balance, all organizations aspire to be relevant in the world, to certainly create economic value, but they also want to, they're committed to enduring success. All leaders want to be associated with enduring success, and they see the value in helping. They want to be good citizens. So my bias is that this is a very common desire across sectors and with most leaders who have been swimming upstream for probably 20 to 30 years to get to this place where they can make a difference at a high level. Against that backdrop, I would say it's not about what you say, it's about what you do. I think it's important to declare yourself. I have at my website at conantleadership.com, I have something about lessons learned, over 35 years in the rearview mirror. And one of the things I say to leaders is it's important you declare yourself because, going back to an earlier comment, people are not mind readers. They need to know where you stand, and they look for clarity. So that's important. But it's also important that once you declare yourself, you deliver on it. So when I'm talking to leaders, I'm not challenging them, I'm asking them, what are you doing to bring your aspirational mission to life in a compelling way? It's not just what you say, it's what you do. And so I go to get to authenticity, it's about what you're doing, not just what you're saying. And so my conversations tend to revolve around what are your aspirations for the company and what are you doing about them? And would an entry-level person coming into the organization be seeing alignment between what you say and what you do? And if not, why not? So that's sort of the nature of the conversation I would have.
What do you read now to keep up with what's going on in business and to look for sources of inspiration in your own work?
Well, again, I go back to the study of leadership is a fascinating journey. And so I'm always reading new works by new leaders and old leaders. And I have a full library. I probably go through about 50 books a year on leadership and in leadership-related areas. And so I am right now rereading all my Stephen Covey work because he had the most profound influence on me of anyone. And became a good friend over the last 20 years of his life. And so kind of as one of my mentors, I am literally rereading all of his work and some of the work of his colleagues that I came to know as well. So that's my focus right now.
And Doug, your practice now with working with other leaders and helping them be better and speaking to groups as a leadership speaker, what is it that you use, some of the techniques or tools that you use to stay on track and be as productive as you are?
I don't know how productive. I went from working in an organization with 20,000 people to working in an organization with 3. But what I have found is my experience is leverageable here. And so right now I'm focusing on the focus of Conant Leadership here, and ConantLeadership.com we taught the language we use is we're dedicated to helping improve the quality of leadership in the 21st century. And I was an aspiring leader for the last quarter of the last century, and I was a CEO for the first decade of this century. And I think there are some lessons learned here, and I'm just trying to find ways to share them that are unique and relevant.
Well, Doug, I really appreciate your sharing some of the many valuable lessons that you've learned. Listeners will take away everything from turning the coin over to rebuild after a setback to deciding to make leadership personal and seek to genuinely be of help to your colleagues, to the approach of leaning into other people so that you find that they offer reciprocity and support you in helping the organization succeed. Doug Conant, I want to thank you for sharing your great ideas and experiences here today on My Quest for the Best.
Well, I'm happy to have had the opportunity to share some of the thoughts with you. I have no notes here. I can go on forever with this stuff, which you can probably tell. But I would tell you, my final thought would be that we can all do better. If we just think about the people who have had the most profound impact on us in our lives, whether they're parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, teachers, mentors, bosses, coaches, they were paying attention to us in a unique way, and they found the right thing to say at the right time in the right way that had a profound influence on us in our lives. And I just challenge people to bring that kind of mindset to the interactions they have every day. That's what I try and do with my work now. And just an understanding that we can all do better and we can all be more helpful. If people bring that intentionality to the work and try and do better and just say every day, how can I help? I think we can build a better world. In fact, I know we can.